Thank you so much for being here on time, and we're ready to rock and roll as far as talking about the County-wide Shared Services Panel. Without further ado, here he is, County Executive George Latimer.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for taking time out of your busy day to join us here. For all of the folks who are coming in a couple of minutes, we'll go around the room and everybody will have a chance to identify themselves, so you'll finally see the names and the faces to go with the people you've been dealing with. We're here today to begin a process. We don't expect that at the end of this meeting that we walk out of here with a plan or even with the exact next steps that each of us are going to have to pursue. We have with us today some very capable people who've been involved in developing these types of plans elsewhere in the state and supervising these plans, and Dr. Jim Malatros and Dr. Gerald Benjamin. They'll be introduced in a few minutes. But we're very, very fortunate to have their expertise with us here. And the expertise that we need is really right around this table. Those of you who are involved in whatever level of municipal government or school district or county government, but the expertise is here in this room. The question is, how do we together find a way to work through this and to create something of value that will actually work in the real world? I've said at a couple of general meetings that I've had a chance to address of county employees that at least 85% of the jobs in county government are jobs that I personally, as county executive, am not qualified to serve in. That's a humbling statement, but it's a true statement. When you interact with your law enforcement professionals, you realize there isn't a single job in the law enforcement community that I have any professional training for. Department of Health, the professional engineers of our DPW department, everybody in our law department, every one of them has specialized training. The challenge that I have as county executive is to work with you and to use our generic managerial skills to find a way to do something that people are expecting us to do, and that is to find economy of scale and work together somehow over dotted line governments. We don't consider ourselves, those of us in this new administration, part of a county government that is above local government. We are brothers and sisters working together. The people that pay the taxes, the people that we see every day in our lives, are our neighbors and friends. They aren't our loyal subjects. And we have to work through a couple of different problems. The first problem is we have a system of government that has evolved. It wasn't created by the Marquis de Sade, although it may look like it was created by the Marquis de Sade. There is a village of Mamaroneck that falls partially within the town of Mamaroneck and partially within the town of Rye, which also has the village of Rye Brook, which is not the same as the city of Rye. There's a sewer district that covers some of the city of Rye, but they call it the Blind Brook District, which is the name of the school district that's in Rye Brook, not in the city of Rye, and on and on and on. And anybody who moves from New York City or any other part of the country, Fairfax, Virginia, Montgomery County, Maryland, they're accustomed to a different type of government. And so what they see here defies logic. And it doesn't matter if there's a historical reason why this happened. That's really irrelevant. The question is now, what do we do going forward? And I have to believe, as a person who believes in democracy and as an American, that we around this table can figure it out, as hard as it is to do. It is not going to be easy to figure out what shared services make the best sense. It's not going to be easy to figure out how to deliver it. Those of us who already have local governments that are functioning at a certain level of efficiency might look at a next-door neighbor community and say, they're not where we are at this stage of the game. Why do we share services? How does that benefit the people that I'm tasked with doing? And those of us in Westchester County, because I've spent time in the state, are looked upon by the rest of the state as we're the little Lord Fauntleroys of the state. We wake up in the morning and we have fed breakfast in bed. That's the perception of Westchester when you're coming out of central Brooklyn or in some of the impacted areas of upstate New York. But as hard as it's going to be, as long as the process it is, we want to view the state government as our partner. We want to view our state government as an opportunity to tap into resources that we don't have collectively to help us accomplish this and the expertise that they have to accomplish it. So as we start the process today, I recognize that there's varying degrees of buy-in, and that will have to be evolved in order for you to feel comfortable in it. But the most important thing is that we try. The people that sent us here, for those of us who are elected officials, they expect us to try. They expect us to be honest about what the difficulties are, but they expect us to try to work through those difficulties. And what I hope in this young administration of mine is that you have already, and you will continue to see, a willing partner here in this county government, that we are working with you side by side with the professionals that exist in all these departments. Most of them existed before I ever became county executive, and that's why I kept most of them, because my hope is that together we will accomplish this task. With that as an opening welcome, and I turn you back over to Deputy County Executive Ken Jenkins.
Thank you, George. In the interest of time, because if we did intros for everyone, it would be about 3 hours long. We certainly want to recognize the other county-wide elected official here. That's the county clerk, Tim Idoni, to make sure that we recognize him. We have the county board of legislators, we have mayors, we have supervisors, we have village managers, we have town board supervisors, we have local managers, we have department heads, but most importantly, we have two of the gentlemen that I'm getting ready to introduce to you. First, I want to introduce to you Dr. Jim Malatras, who's the president of Rockefeller Institute of Government, where he's leading the Institute's modernization effort to offer policymakers evidence-based policy analysis and recommendations on timely topics. And prior to becoming president, Dr. Malatras has held several high-ranking positions in New York State government. Most recently, he served as Director of State Operations to Governor Andrew M. Cuomo, where he managed the day-to-day operations of state government. Dr. Malatras. The Rockefeller Institute of Government is a public policy think tank, by the way, that was founded in 1981 that conducts cutting-edge research and analysis to inform lasting solutions to the problems facing New York State and the nation. Next, I'd like to introduce to you Jerry Benjamin. So it's Gerard, but he loves calling him Jerry, so make sure that we call him Jerry. Jerry Benjamin is appointed Associate Vice President for Regional Engagement and the Director of the Benjamin Center at SUNY New Paltz in 2008. Benjamin, who joined the New Paltz faculty as an Assistant Professor of Political Science in 1968, achieved the university's highest rank in 2002 when he was appointed the Distinguished Professor by the SUNY Board of Trustees. He serves as the chair of the Department of Political Science, presiding officer of the faculty, and for 12 years, beginning in 1996, Dean of the College of Liberal Arts. Most importantly, the Benjamin Center is the principal focus of the college efforts to raise this level of engagement within communities, governments, not-for-profits, and businesses across Hudson Valley. Let's give a round of applause for Jerry Benjamin. With that being said, I'm going to turn over to Dr. Malatras. Dr. Malatras.
Good afternoon. I'm going to introduce some of the rest of our team in a minute. That was a really enthusiastic response. I can tell you're all really jazzed about this, which reminds me of this photo. And that is how you feel right now, because you're back talking about shared services. And what's more than that, that is what you're here when you hear us talking about shared services. Here comes people to talk about how we should manage our government. Hopefully, though, that is not the impression you get after you leave, or nor is it this impression that they hired a consulting firm, 2 consulting firms to come in and help. But we think this is going to be a fruitful thing. To build on Ken, and thank you to the county executive and Emily and Joan and Ken and Larry and the entire Westchester team for working closely with us already. It's been a really good experience, and I think it's going to be a real fruitful plan and robust plan as we go forward. Here's our team. You mentioned Jerry Benjamin already. He is so well known that the center is named after him, so he can actually not be fired from his own center. It must be a nice thing. I'm named after a Rockefeller, and I'm not even, of that party, so that's a problem for me. We're also joined by Tom Citrino, who's with the Benjamin Center. He's worked very closely on local government issues for many years. And they're not here today, but we're going to be joined by Al Gata and Patty Dwyer, both who probably all know Al, and Pal, you call him Al, and Patty, who has worked in village government for many, many years in the Orange County area in particular. So they're going to be helping us, and their expertise, I think collectively, I'm the youngest of the bunch, but we have many decades of experience. What I like about this team is we have union backgrounds, we have management backgrounds, we have Republican and Democratic backgrounds, so it literally captures everything. Jerry and others have been elected officials, so they have a real local government element. And then we'll have a Rockefeller Institute of Government staff, whom you'll probably hear from on some level. We have a lot of people that will be helping on the project, please take our information because we want to engage with you in a repeated manner. We're going to, if you reach out to us, we'll get more contact information. But for now, especially Jerry's information, take his information, because how this works, so you know, he takes all the difficult questions and I take all the easy questions. But I think it's important. We want to have a lot of interaction with you, so that would be great. I want to briefly, you've already gone, many of you went through the state's countywide shared services initiative. I just want to go through some of the basic parameters. Some of the rules have changed since the last time you've done this, which we want to talk about where we kind of ended up and where we want to go. And then ultimately what we'd like to do with this very short presentation is have a dialogue with you all here. You've taken time out to come here today, and we want to really get a sense of things that you want us to focus on and work with the county executive's office on. So we want it to be more interactive. So this will be brief. It's a very simple initiative, right? Convene the counties, the heads of the counties have to convene all the municipalities to find ways to lower the cost of local government and find efficiencies through shared services. Every county has the requirement to convene these panels by law, and they have to develop a plan. There are three main buckets of, three main parts of the program. First is the panel, which you all are going to be, in many cases, participating on. Then develop the actual plan. And then the part that we always find exciting is making sure we're matching up the savings to the state investment that they've made. There's a $225 million pot of money, pot of gold waiting to be matched. So that's something that we want to make sure that we get at. I think the county executive summed it up brilliantly, the way he talked about the overlapping and sort of how governments have sort of metastasized over time. It wasn't anybody's fault, but this is from the comptroller's website about how governments are broken up, and people, it's hard to explain to citizens what it all is, right? That's part of the problem, explaining the services that we provide at the county, local level, or the county level, or the town or village level. What is a sewer district, and why is that different than a different type of town-run special district, which is different than a department, right? Those are things that are complicated. And the other thing that strikes people in New York, and it's going to get a little worse, which I'll talk about in a second, is because of our overall property tax burden. We double basically the national average, the national median. We all know in Westchester that's significantly higher, right? They stopped counting after $10,000 in the Census Bureau, so they put a star next to Westchester County. It's not actually 10,000, they just stopped counting. But that does go to show you the sort of importance of trying to address some of these issues, but not as a cost-cutting issue just generally, but also just better services for people. And then what we're trying to grapple with, this is all happening in the shadow of the federal tax bill. I know you all have been talking about this. This is a real legitimate concern. We will try to help analyze different proposals as a way to offset what's going to happen. We don't have to get into the details of how high earners under SALT will then potentially move and affect the tax base, but it is a real legitimate concern for many communities, especially downstate, Westchester being probably the #1 county to have to worry about the negative effects of the federal tax law. And on some levels, you're already seeing this, and we'll help do whatever analysis that you want. That's why we're here. 11 states are already facing difficult times. They have missed their budgets deadlines, not because of the politics of, like you think of budget deadlines in Albany as they're late for political reasons. They literally can't find the revenue to close their budget gaps. So they have late budgets while they're trying to grapple with how to pay for budget deficits. We've seen an influx, but at the same time, we've seen an influx of of local and county tax revenue. But that's largely because people, especially in high tax counties or other counties, high wealth counties, pre-filed their taxes to try to get ahead of the tax law. So we have this influx. Then people say, well, wait, it's coming back, the revenue's coming back, but actually we think it's more of a one-time thing. So that's something that we're grappling with and we'll help grapple with hopefully in the plan. Here was what happened under the law last year. You were part of it. We had 34 counties submit plans. There were 389 projects with a total of $208 million worth of savings in year one. The $208 million was a little bit misleading. The out years is actually about $75 million on average of savings among all the counties that submitted their plans, because there was a large plan that came from Nassau County that we don't think is going to happen. If anybody can make it happen, you get an extra bonus, even if you're from a different county. They're serious about that. They want to get the project done. We found basically 12 main areas where the county's focused on, and we'll make this available to everybody so you don't have to squint and try to read it. And the 12 areas we found projects from the different counties were in public health and insurance, health consortia and other things, emergency services, 911 call centers and things like that, sewer, wastewater management systems. That was a big focus of attention. That's where one of the big projects are, but there were a lot of other projects around that. Energy procurement was another big area. That is something that Westchester is doing extraordinarily well, and actually has been a model for other counties, but there's other things to explore there. Parks and recreation, education and workforce training, law and courts, especially with court consolidation. Upstate, that was one of the main areas. Tom Citrino, who's with us, can talk about many of that, including the health piece. Shared service and personal service sharing. Personal service sharing was one of the biggest buckets. People call it low-hanging fruit. It is often, but when you actually put it into practice, it's more difficult. But getting those things up and running are important things for government efficiencies, services, as well as tax savings. We had 66 or so projects that came out of that. It was by far one of the biggest buckets of savings. Then we had joint purchasing, government reorganization. One county, Montgomery County, was actually pushing dissolution and consolidation of some of the municipalities as part of their plan. Transportation highway departments, records management, so a total of 389 projects in 12 categories. The one thing that came out of this, and which we'll try to work with you on, because it's the end game of justifying to the state the actual savings. When the budget division gets involved, they really want to see how the savings actually come to be, and Larry is probably got to pull his hair out for some of this to figure it out. But there was wide variation among how counties presented their plans. Chautauqua and Schenectady County, for instance, provided great detail. They could back up every nickel that they put in their plan, which was very helpful to analyze. Some actually provided no information. Columbia and Wyoming County sort of said, we found $10 million of savings. You asked them how, then there was crickets, right? So it was wide variation. We want to avoid that trap of, it sounds like great numbers. We are more conservative in our estimates because we don't want to oversell the public, nor do we want to oversell you, because we also want to make sure you get your state match and that the things actually happen and that we set expectations for the public that makes sense. I think Nassau County is going to have to grapple with when $130 million doesn't come their way, how do they deal with the fact that $130 million in taxpayer savings aren't coming their way? We make Jerry explain that piece. This was a snapshot that many of you worked on last year of Westchester County. There were 12 projects in the end for a total of about $1.2 million in the out years. What is different, which we think is great what the county executive is doing, he invited school districts, and some of you are here today, to participate in the process. Given their experience with BOCES and other things, we think that could bear a lot of fruit. And just talking about how to manage some services together. So having school districts and others here today are very helpful. To put Westchester in perspective, this is what my mother always called the tough love section of the presentation. If you look at the continuum of property tax levels, so to the left, or your left, yep, is the highest taxed counties in the state, and to the right is the lowest counties. The bars are how much savings each county found. If you look at the continuum, Westchester was on the low side across the state, and if you look at some of the middling counties that have lower tax burdens, they actually found a heck of a lot more savings in a year on a per capita and a total basis. So 2 examples, Montgomery County, which is sort of right in the middle there, had about $4.5 million of savings. They're a very small county, and they fall right in the middle of the overall property tax burden. And just one other piece for that, if you break it down just by size, the top left blue, dark blue being the largest populated counties, and then you get smaller by the green. Again, if you compare it to the larger counties, Westchester was behind the larger counties, and in some cases behind the smaller populated counties in overall tax savings. which just means there's opportunities for us to roll up our sleeves and do more and really build on the past success. There's a lot of success in what you all have been doing in Westchester. We actually highlighted it in the Albany County plan, some of the things that you were doing here in towns and villages across the county. We want to highlight those things. Part of this is to highlight what the county is already doing. And we also want to pull out some of the things that you may not think are worthy of a report, but they're worthy of a match. So anything you're doing that sounds like shared services or efficiencies, we are going to take and put into this report and analyze, because we want to make sure that we're maximizing your savings overall. Here is the process. I know many of you sat through it. It's basically the same timeline as last year. So we don't have a lot of time to do this. This is already the middle of May. The county executive has already convened as the head of the panel. We are all sitting here today, which is great. All city, village, and town supervisors within the county are required to sit on the panel. School districts and others are optional, and I think they've been invited in order to gather as many ideas, which I think is very helpful and useful. The plan has to be recurring. They can't be one-shot deals. That's going to be one of the things. So it has to be recurring year over year property tax savings. And this was how they expressed it in their policies and law, which kind of frames how the state's thinking about it. They're looking at duplicative services, shared services like joint purchasing, shared highway equipment, storage facilities, plowing services, insurance purchasing cooperatives, and the reduction of back office administrative overhead. And then better coordination of services, which people don't naturally think about as a shared service savings. But if you do better coordinated services, that can often yield results. This year, given what we propose to do, and I think the county is amenable to it, is we're going to withdraw your plan. That gives us the ability to use what you did last year as a starting point again, and take those savings that have not happened, the proposed savings, and use them as if they're new. So we're going to withdraw your plan, hopefully, and then start again tabula rasa. And that way, we're going to include everything from last year plus all the new things, which will allow us to get at least the 2.1 million, if it does happen, in the future years as tax savings and state financial matches back to you. The process, you have to have the draft plan to the county legislative body by August 1st. And then the final plan has to be adopted and voted on no later than September 15th of this year. And then we have to do a public hearing on it in October. So there's not a lot of time. Within that process, we have to have 3 public hearings. They varied among the counties. If you just look at a sort of snapshot of how many counties did it, some did it all on the same day. Some did it on the same day at the same time in different parts of the building. We don't recommend that. I think as much as we can here, I think the county executive's office is going to be organizing and putting out flyers, which we have one here. I think the first one is June 14th, which everybody will have. We would ask you to advertise it. We are going to advertise it on our websites. We're going to do social media. The county's going to do social media. It's important, critically important, to have the public come. And unlike other public hearings, I don't know if you'll be amused or not by it, we engage with the public pretty directly as long as they'd like to engage within reason, because we think that actually helps. Tom Citrino's hair was brown the first time he did it. His hair is now white after doing 3 public hearings in 1 county, but we think that's important. So we really want you to advertise it because that is a critical part of this. The law works differently, but we come at it with a little bit of a different approach, which we'll talk about. The law says we have a plan of 10 ideas, and the towns and villages or school districts that they're participating have to opt out by a public vote. So if you don't want to be in part of the proposal or part of the plan, you have to raise your hand and say, I don't want to be in it. We do it a little differently. We don't feel like it should be done in a negative way or somehow you're being penalized for not wanting to participate in a certain proposal, because it doesn't always work across the board uniformly. Shared services aren't all equal. We do it as an opt-in. So our final plan says who's opted into the particular provisions of each of the proposals, and that's what we add to our report, those municipalities wanting to do certain proposals. We have to then when we take the vote, each proposal has to be voted on individually. So each proposal, how many there are, get an individual vote that we mark down. And then we have to provide that all to the state in the end. You are all very sophisticated governmental servants. What often gets confused, and we like to do this right up at the top, especially when we do public hearings, this law doesn't confer any new authority to the panel to do things that you have to get local laws or referenda in order to accomplish. What often happens is they think if you say, we want to talk about highway services, they think that somehow communities think the panel can just vote on it and it happens. None of that is actually true. The law doesn't give you any new rights. It gives us the right to continue the discussion in local communities. So if something requires a public referendum in a town or a village, for instance, like a dissolution or even a highway merger, you still have to go through all of those legal processes to accomplish that. We note it in the report. The report itself does not grant any new powers to this panel. So that's important when we think about what we want to include and not include, because some of these things are harder to do than others, and we want to make sure that we're getting all the things that we can potentially get done. The other piece to think about when we're doing this is determining the overall property tax savings for the plan is actually really complicated. For the purposes of the submission to the state, it's pretty easy. You divide. But if certain municipalities are opting in and others aren't opting in, how does that work, right? Should only the municipalities providing the shared service get the tax savings for their people? It gets more complicated because if you're a village resident, you also are a town resident, and you also are a county resident, and you also are in a school district. What happens if the village does it, but the town doesn't do it, and the county says, I don't really want to do it, but they do it with another village? What portion of the savings do you ascribe to the resident? We have to figure that out for you. Wish us luck. It's very hard. Jerry does the math, not me, thank goodness. But those are things to also think about. Some municipalities have done it differently. It doesn't have to work that way, where they just do an overall cost-sharing arrangement. You put all the cost savings in together, you divide it by a county resident, because everybody's a county resident, and that's the savings. But that's a discussion to have as we're going through the process. Another provision of the law, we have to consult with all of the labor bargaining units in the county. There are many bargaining units, as you all know. That can get unwieldy. So we should talk through a process of doing that. We like to focus on some of the key union leaders within each sector. That way they can communicate the ideas as opposed to us reaching out to 500 different local bargaining units, because then that becomes a really unwieldy process for everyone. Here's the timeline just sort of put in a chart. We have until August 1st to do the draft. The legislature gets a month or a little less than a month to offer the comments on the plan. They don't have to vote the plan up or down. We vote on the final plan by September 15th, and there's also often great variation from the draft plan to the final plan based on hearings and your input and the input of the legislature. Then we do a final hearing in October, and we submit it to the county, to the state for final approval. Our approach is a little different. We like to do bottom-up consensus building approach with you all. We don't have any grand plans for what we think your plan should be. We don't feel, we're not arrogant enough to say this is what your local communities want, this is what you want to do. We feel like it should come from you guys. We will help deliver whatever you want to deliver to your communities, and that's why we're really here. We're here to facilitate the things that you would like to do. We like to focus on some of the areas, particularly on the shared service, better coordination, and elimination of duplication. Often they're not the sexiest things in the world, but if you could talk about IT sharing, the public is none the wiser if everybody's sharing a Microsoft 365 account, but there could be real savings. And coordination, and that's why I think having the school districts, and I think Jerry and Tom and others would agree, are really important. School districts are often not talking to local municipalities on certain things because they have BOCES and other models. What we found was in communities that brought school districts into the fold early on, like you are doing here today, the plans were by far the best plans around the state, and they are actually working together on coordination of services, not even naturally sharing services or consolidating functions, just better coordination of services, which I think will bear considerable fruit, especially for that taxpayer who pays the town tax, the county tax, the village tax, the city tax in some instances, and then the school tax on top. Who does what becomes another thing. We try to avoid the county takes over everything approach because that doesn't actually help anybody. That just shifts. That's like shifting the deck chairs on the Titanic. You're still a county taxpayer. The county cost doesn't go down if everybody gives everything to the county. We work often on the county facilitates shared services among municipalities. We think that's a good approach that has worked in other parts of the state. And then we really like to focus on municipalities forming their own partnerships as they see fit, as they see needs, because there's lots of municipalities here. You all don't want to do the same thing, but where the county can help facilitate or where you can help build your own sort of shared service MOU or agreement, even away from the county, is important. Finally, we like to really hit a key piece, which is we like to focus on the overhead and not people. We'll talk about attrition and workforce management. We talked about shared personnel in Albany County, which was important because some small villages don't have the construction capacity to do certain things. Or even maintaining LED lights, you would be surprised. They don't have a workforce for that. Sharing personnel is one thing. We like to get out. You will have whatever conversation you want, but we like to focus on the overhead first and then talk about those other things. And the whole piece that we would like to really focus on is efficiency to improve services for people, not just cutting as an operational sort of code here. It is how do you improve that service for people. The other thing that we'd like to do, because there's a lot of questions with the state, we want to, whatever partnerships or opportunities you would like to work with on the state, whether it be NYSERDA, NYPA on the energy side, Department of Transportation, the Public Service Commission with dealing with Con Ed, which I know you all love here. We want to, or Department of Health or Department of Financial Services, we will facilitate meetings, information sessions on any issue you want. We found that has been the most helpful, frankly, in breaking down some of the traditional barriers, not a mandate relief versus non-mandate relief, but people talked about barriers in health consortia for years here. We can't do a health consortium because there's state laws. We worked together and found out there wasn't actually state law. Based on what our work with the Rockefeller Institute and Benjamin Center, the Department of Financial Services and DOH actually changed their regulations so they had more flexibility in local governments based on this process. So where you have ideas, we will help facilitate that and try to drive that process. And if they don't listen to us, we send the county executive to them, and he gets angry, and he's very persistent. So I use it as the good cop, bad cop. I'm the nice guy, and I said, but you don't want George calling you because that's a problem. Finally, it's true, by the way. They will listen to the county executive. The key steps for us before we get into a little bit of a dialogue with you today is, here are the sort of 4 things that we need from you, and we beg your patience with us. One, I know the county's already sent out a brief survey. We have a survey we'd like you to complete because that helps us on 2 levels. One, we want to have some of the ideas that you'd like us to pursue. 2, we need some basic financial information because we have to verify and certify with the state that what we're saying our savings are actually the actual savings. We don't like to make it up on your behalf. So some of this we need, and some of it's not easily accessible through your local budgets. So simple things like electricity costs. Many budgets don't actually include them as a line item, but we need to know that. Water costs, things like that. We interview, as part of our process, every municipality, every school district, any special district that will get an interview. We think that is an important process. That we have a team. I think Patty and Al and Tom and Jerry and I will be reaching out to you. It won't take more than an hour. We can do it in person or by phone, but that helps us really understand where you're coming from and what you want to focus on. So if you can make that time, we'd like to schedule those. We don't have a lot of time. We'd like to get these done before the draft plan. And I know people have vacation plans and other things. And by the way, you also have to manage your community. I get, the consultants come and we want to talk to you, and you're like, but I have to deal with a water main break. I get all of that. But that does really help hear what your voices are. And we want to hear your voices in this report, not our voices. The third piece is the past successes. You have done a lot in your community. Send those our way, because we want to include those in the report to show a lot of the level of cooperation and efficiencies that you've already done. That helps frame the good things that you're doing in Westchester. And then it also finds sometimes you think you have a success, but it's not a success yet. We might be able to turn a potential success that you were going to do anyway into a savings and into a state match. So we want to get those little nuggets that you may already be doing and turn that into state savings for you. And then finally, potential interest. As we go through the process, we want to hear from you as you're hearing where we're going because of where you're going, of things that may be interesting and not interesting to you, because we want to take the things that you may think are anathema off the table and focus on those real issues. So anyway, with that, that was our presentation. We would love to hear from you, get a sense of ideas. I'd like to turn it over to Jerry if he has a few words, or Tom, and then spend the remainder of our time to really get a sense of what you would like to focus on. So thank you for indulging me.
Okay, let's get one or two things out of the way at the outset. First of all, it is my daughter on TV, and no, I can't get you on. She doesn't listen to me, as with any parent's lament. Second, naming the center after me was not my idea. In fact, I told the president that it couldn't happen because I'm Jewish, and we don't name things after living people, and I wasn't willing to meet the condition. But nevertheless, he found some examples, and I had that great honor, so he can still fire me. Two or three things. We don't want to talk endlessly. One, we know that there are a lot of achievements in shared services throughout the state and in this county. And this process is sometimes taken as not considerate of the fact of how much has already been done. And people say, well, we've done a lot, it's not acknowledged. People are now trying to force us to do more, and it's not received in a particularly positive way. I would say two things about that. We will acknowledge and include what you've done for match if we can, but certainly for acknowledgement and to make that point. Second, I've been doing this for nigh on 50 years now, and I learn something every day about things that I didn't know could be done that could be done. For example, the mayor of New Paltz is obsessed with water systems. And I've gotten interested in water loss and the cost of lost water in the system and for villages and cities, and the cost of discovering how to deal with lost water. And it strikes me that there are collaborative efforts that are possible amongst places not proximate to each other, and that's the other point. All these governments aren't next door to each other, but they have common problems, sometimes can be addressed with common resources and common approaches and common shared people. So I think that my experience just says there's a lot to do, a lot to learn, and a lot to know, and not every idea has been tested in every place. And we're going to bring ideas from other places, and there are some spectacular opportunities that arise. Second point I'd like to make is that the smallest places benefit the most. It seems counterintuitive. The biggest places have the most dollars to save. The smallest places have the most proportional benefit to achieve. And that's just been our experience in Albany County, it's been our experience in Ulster County, and it's been my experience from looking what has gone on across the state. So we're interested in talking to everybody one-on-one to find out what they think. And fourth, I live in a village that's got the same name as the town. And it's occurred to people that we might not want to have both a village and a town. One mistake made in looking at this circumstance is that it's the old consolidation game, eliminate governments game. We're not interested in telling you to eliminate governments. In fact, my research, insofar as anybody reads it, my research shows that people's idea of community is bound up with their governments, and if we threaten people's idea of community, we're not going to get very far. So we're interested in enhancing and supporting ideas of community and harnessing them towards collaborative ends that serve multiple communities. And respecting the commitments people have rather than confronting them. So the ideas have to come, and Jim used the term bottom up. That's one way of putting it. Another way of putting it is that a non-hierarchical situation. In terms of this process, everybody's equal, whether they have 500 residents or 100,000 residents in their community. The ideas are equally valid and can be equally powerful. And we're interested in those ideas and actual results. One final point, we have to bend the cost curve. We can't let the cost curve keep moving in the direction it's going. Government is expensive in Westchester and people are buying quality. But at some point, the cost of doing what we're doing exceeds our capacity to do it. So we have to bend that curve, and this is the goal here, is to work together to make that happen. And I really look forward to meeting I have some friends in the room that they're extraordinarily persistent people to keep that commitment. But for those I haven't met, I'm looking forward to meeting and talking to you.
So, any questions? Where would you like us to focus? Are there issues or parts of the process that you would like us to modify? What would be best way of utilizing your time and making sure that we maximize the process and ultimately maximize what we think are the state savings and match for you? We could not have wowed you. Were there things from the past process that did not work that you want us to avoid?
What's the Met score going to be tonight?
Yeah.
I'll break the ice. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
There you go.
My name is Chris Steers, Village Manager, Village of Portchester. You made mention of the fact that once the plan is to be adopted and voted on, the local municipalities have to take action as well.
If there's something that actually gets at the authority of the municipality. So if you say you want to, if you're in your role as chief executive of a village, you have the authority to enter into shared service agreements for like sharing dump trucks. You don't need to have a village vote on that. But if you say part of the proposal that we want this panel to vote on is the dissolution of my village, well, that requires a referendum at the local community and all of those types of things. There will be some proposals that may take extra steps in order for it to happen because this doesn't confer new law. So if it's within your power now and you can vote on things, you don't have to go back to your community. People do it for good governance and political reasons, but if you only have to go back to your local government if other players are involved in the process. You can't eliminate as a town if you have a separately elected highway department and say, we're voting to eliminate our highway department here, without the highway department getting involved or a referendum. That law still applies. That's the difference. Consolidations, right.
Okay, thank you. The one thought that I've been having, had discussions internally with some of my board members, is dealing with perhaps working with the county to change the recycling program to single stream. What that would do for us would save a lot of time and energy and manpower and equipment on our end in our collection of the recycling. I don't know if that's ever been discussed by the panel or at the county level.
Well,
apparently not.
They're looking at it, so we'll look at it and we'll do the benefits and challenges and put it to the panel, and I think we'll have a discussion. We'll add that to the list of something we'll look into as a potential thing for the panel to deal with.
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's on. Warren Lucas, Supervisor North Salem. I think one of the things that's a problem when we do this, and you asked for some comments, when you have this many people in a room, it doesn't work too well. And so what I would just suggest is maybe breakout groups or something along those lines where you can get down to maybe 20 people that can discuss an issue or an item. You know, we just heard about single stream. I already do single stream. Some people don't have municipal garbage, other people do. And so, you know, there's just a lot of issues like that, that while we're all in the one county, we're all substantially different. So last time, and this many people in a room doesn't work too well.
That's a good point, and we could do this two ways. What we'd like to do, if this works for the pen, you're right, we definitely have a minion, but I don't know how much you get done with the minion. I think we would like to collect one-on-one some of your ideas. That way we get a sense of the overarching sort of board of what people are presenting, and then we can form smaller breakout groups based on subject areas if you're interested or something like that. So we could break these down, because some of it will take discussion. Some of it may be, even though you do single stream on recycling, you have a lot of wisdom and knowledge to sort of offer to that working group on what to do, right? Or not, or you want to stay away from it. So we will break it down, I think, but it would be good to have the initial round of interviews. So they won't be big rooms like that. We like the more intimate setting ourselves.
Well, that particular thing saved me 25% of my municipal garbage budget by going single stream. So that may be important, right. As a breakout.
I'm going to suggest two things. One is not a surprise for those who know me, but that's consolidating the sewer districts and having the county consider and look at administering the entire sewer systems. And the other is the MS4 program that is in review at the state level that will be coming out in the next, I don't know, 6 months or 12 months. But all of us are considered MS4 communities, and we'll have to work on that. And if we could do that with some assistance from the county in a regional consolidated way, I think that would be helpful.
Great.
Oh, sorry. Yes. No, no, sorry. So I'm Nancy Seligson. I'm the supervisor of the town of Mamaroneck. And MS4 refers to municipal storm sewer, everything. Discharge. Thank you.
Thank you for putting the name to the, so we're not put you down as the sewer district consolidation person.
There's actually technology for measuring the outflows that's very inexpensive that's coming online that could be interesting as well.
Hi, I'm Charlene Indelicato, Village of Dobbs Ferry. And I know this is like sort of the elephant in the room. I know that schools are not required to participate. And do you have any ideas on how we can encourage our schools to participate? Because that would be a really real savings for us, and especially with mowing and DPW's things, etc.
It's funny you say that. Sometimes it's the simple things that people overlook. You first invite them, which what the county executive did, which I think just that outreach has been enormously helpful, because it's not a natural thing if you're not asked. We found, I mentioned it in the presentation, I'll let Jerry or Tom, because they worked on this pretty extensively too. Those discussions are the most fruitful. And on the simplest things, I use this story because it's a story that actually resonated with schools. Every year, there are a couple of school districts in Albany that have to rent cherry pickers. And they kept saying, well, we need to have shared services for cherry pickers. And I couldn't understand, why do they rent cherry pickers? Because in old gymnasiums, which many of our schools are older, they have to change the light bulbs every year. So they rent these cherry pickers at a cost. The towns all have cherry pickers. They never just talk to us. Said, well, just give them the cherry picker for 20 minutes and they'll go up and they'll change the light bulbs, and that's $5,000. Now, we joke $5,000 on a cherry picker, but that's $5,000 in new books or something else. Why not spend the $5,000 somewhere else? So those types of conversations, having them at the table, the question is, I think, as the gentleman said in the back, how do you ensure that we facilitate the ability for you to have worthwhile discussions? We'll have to work on some sort of breakout where schools can talk to towns, but shared personnel on especially weather-related events like snow, they take their maintenance staff out of their schools often to do snow removal when there's still problems going on in their schools. Well, there's often DPW folks in the towns or villages that are willing to help in that process to move school along, to keep school open. So as much as you can facilitate those things, we're going to do. But I think having the county executive inviting them is a key piece to this, to start having those discussions, especially with BOCES, because they often work in a shared services sort of construct.
And Charlene, earlier today I met with some representatives from the School Boards Association. We had, and Lisa's here right now, we had some discussions to try to identify areas where the county can be directly helpful for the school. And I think perhaps there is, and I'm sure it's in this room with a lot of folks here, there's a natural cynicism that says that this effort will be just another effort somehow for the county to devolve something out of its responsibilities. And I think what we talked about today was to really try to understand what can the schools benefit from. If we can identify those things, then I think they will be at the table and they will participate as long as they see what their interests are served as well. So we're trying to find that. And look, I understand it's difficult, but I do know, as an example, because I have represented a third of the county as a legislator, and I know a lot of the people in this room, we've worked in things. I know that somehow in Larchmont Village and Mamaroneck Town, you have a joint sanitation commission. You might not have a similar structure in two other communities. I know that there are any number of different relationships that happen. Portchester and Rybrook come together on the library. Not every two communities come together on the library. So there are examples of school cooperation. I think what we have to do is figure out which of those make the greatest amount of sense in Community A and Community B. And there'll be a certain amount of people that will be reticent to do it, but that's what we'll have to try to work through. But you're correct in that is the elephant in the room, and we'll have to try to work through it.
One of the things that the plan requires in municipalities, but school districts are welcome. One of the things that you all can do, I'm talking about the municipalities now, is invite your school districts to participate in your calls with Jim and his team, or else you can also connect Jim with his team with them separately. But you have the opportunity at your local level to bring in your school district. They may not agree, but you can certainly try to involve them in this process from the very beginning, and they can tell you about some other programs that other counties have in which school districts and municipalities are working together.
Focus on now. And schools especially, schools want to move to solar and other things, but they don't have the property, right? They're a self-confined government on some level, separately elected boards. So they want to use their property for ball fields and stuff, and they can't put the solar panels on their roofs because the roofs are too old, right? The buildings are too old. So there's talk in many places that, well, towns have lots of property often, usable space. Well, you can put your solar panels there and you can get the cost. There's like prohibitions in law because you're considered two separate entities by law. Now, explain that to a taxpayer, right? What do you mean? I go across the street, I'm in a town, and I can't put a solar panel. So certain things like that where we'll try to help change the rules or laws in order for you to do that even naturally outside of this. So in the school area especially, if you can have those conversations. We got that, by the way, not because we knew it, because a school district said to us, we have this problem, can you work with us with the town? I'm sorry, Joe, go ahead.
Well, we really want to communicate that we don't want to impose priorities. We want to elicit priorities. But we're also bringing a lot of information from other places. So, for example, in Suffolk County, they've created a portal for all the governments to put up on the portal what they have available to share. And some governments are, and this is, by the way, not the county trying to convince towns or villages to do things, but towns and villages offering their ideas voluntarily. And some places are covering the costs of financing newly purchased equipment by leasing it out, by sharing it and getting a fee for sharing it. In the portal, I was talking to the person who runs this in Suffolk County last month, and he told me that he was standing next to a school official referring to the question at an event, and the school official was bemoaning the cost of paving the driveway of the high school. And he said, well, we'll do that. We can probably do it for less. And the school district saved $150,000 on the paving job. And the men working for the Department of Public Works of the county were happy to have the overtime. So just opening up the communications and being a resource for you if we have ideas or experience or have read some of this stuff is helpful for you to take back to people who you might be able to work with and say, well, I know about this case, I know about that case. It's not great social science because it's all examples and not systematically statistical analysis, but it works out pretty well.
Hi, I'm Gary Zuckerman, supervisor of the town of Rye. I'd like to address the issue of uniform assessment of real property. Every town has its own assessor, and assessors have different methodologies. We use different computer systems, and it not only has an effect on individual town and village taxes, but obviously the county tax. When you have some communities at full assessment and other communities at 3% assessment. And I think this is an area that the county can take a role, and I know that the Charter Revision Commission at one point issued a report addressing this issue, and I think that it's something that really needs to be taken up again.
Jerry actually worked on that, so he's going to get all those questions. I stay out of assessment, so if I'm out, no, I'm kidding. But we've worked. Jerry was worked on that. And Al got it too.
If I could just add on a little bit about the schools. Chris Bradbury from the Village of Rybrook, Village Administrator. We work very closely with our school districts. We have several in our community. And sometimes we can mention that there's a savings, but sometimes there's also a lot of revenue potential working with the schools. You know, we work things on equipment sharing, turf maintenance, things like that. There's use agreements. We give prices when they're looking to get striping for parking lots and stuff like that. We give quotes for those types of services. When there's bidding opportunities for them to go out for sanitation services, they piggyback with us on our sanitation services. So there's opportunities for shared, for cost savings. On the other side of that, there's been revenue opportunities with the school. So I don't know if that fits within the state plan, but one of our nicest alternative revenue sources we have, the school had a need for developing after-school programs at the school. What do? We provide recreation services. So we became a licensed New York State school-age child care program, and we run an after-school program every day at the schools, and we get great revenue from that. The school gets the benefit of the kids and the parents. The kids can stay at the location where they are now. We're a licensed program. We have the recreations right in our wheelhouse. We hire some people that work at the schools that help with homework help and things like that, and it's a nice cooperative effort where we're able to get additional revenue and the school provides services for the people that go there. So I just don't want to lose that sight. Some of it's also increasing revenues, not just sharing, saving money.
Thank you so much. I wanted to make sure that to recognize a couple of things. Is one, with the department heads and certainly the county legislators and the head of the Board of Legislators, chairman of the Board of Legislators, Ben Boykin, when you're doing those conversations with Jim and the team, to make sure that you involve your legislator, because they many times cross over in all those areas as well. And certainly part of the reason that all of the department heads are here to make sure that whatever county departments that we have to help you, to reach out to them directly to make sure that we can help out in working through the county executive's office. Mr. Chairman, I saw you have the mic in your hand.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Deputy County Executive.
You're on.
I'm Ben Boykin, Chair of the Board of Legislators, and we really look forward to the report, because when we got the report last year, we realized that not a lot of work had really gone into it, so we're really looking forward to a new detailed report gotten to us on August 1st, and then we'll have the Board of Legislators vote on it by September 15th. But I want to go back to the school district. When I was on the White Plains Common Council, I was appointed and asked to chair the Services Committee for the city of White Plains, and we worked with the school district. And we put a program in process that is still being used, where the city of White Plains repairs and maintains all of the White Plains School District vehicles. The vehicles were coming to the Department of Public Works already to get gasoline, and we said, wow, this is a natural extension. Why not have them serviced there? We were able to free up employees from the school district to do other things. The city is able to maintain those vehicles, and not only do we maintain the vehicles, but we also put the vehicles on the appropriate replacement cycle. So it was been a real savings for the White Plains School District and the city working together. There are a lot of things that are difficult to do, but they can be done. We looked at numerous areas of trying to work with the school district. We had meetings at the White Plains City Hall. We had meetings also at Ed House. So you gotta be collaborative, but you gotta work on the municipal's turf as well as working on the school district's turf. And everyone has to have an equal partnership in it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we just hope that you take it easy on our initial draft because we were very sensitive. Jerry is very sensitive. And just on John's point on the schools, I think revenue is not a bad word, right? Sometimes savings and revenue is not a thing. And you raised an important point which has been raised by others and it should be considered potentially for this plan. Taking savings and making them more efficient in order to put investment into programs and other places is also something to consider when you're doing a report like this, right? It's not just a cut government, it's how you're taking back office savings and using it for something. Those should be noted in your report because it could also offer up other incentives from the state and other places, not just on the shared services program, right? If you're doing an aftercare program or after school program based on this service, you may not get a shared services grant out of it, but there's aftercare programming that you could get out of it too, which we could also help work with.
Hi, thanks. Noam Bramson, the mayor of New Rochelle. I really appreciate the comprehensive and thoughtful nature of the presentation, and I'm sure this is going to be a fruitful exercise. The timetable you laid out obviously makes perfect sense for the exercise in its totality, but I wonder if there are certain things that may have to be considered on a separate accelerated track. And I'm thinking specifically about the administration of the state's new tax/charity law, which I'm told by our finance folks is a bear to understand and will be an even bigger bear to administer, which will in all likelihood require us to bring on additional staff. And so if that could be partially or wholly centralized, the collection and tracking of payments, I think it would be of enormous benefit to us, and yet we are facing timetables related to the issuance and payment of tax bills. And so there's some urgency to get rolling quickly. And so if this proves feasible and something that others are interested in, I just wanted to wait for the adoption of the plan in its entirety. I'd want to know that we could move earlier rather than later.
Mayor, thank you for that. That's actually an important point. And that does also raise, put aside the shared services program, that is a bear of an issue that everybody, right? The state's grappling with it. You all have to grapple with it. It is complicated. If there are ways that we can also even facilitate with the state to have a breakout session or something on that to come up with ideas, so your voice, we'll organize that too. And we'll do that quickly. We did that in other plans as well, where there was a need to move on certain things. We did it in Albany County on a couple of issues, especially this health issue, because it's so complicated. It could be 10 years before you even start unless you get a good start. So yeah, that will be one area that we'll put a pin in and get moving on right away. And then we'll try to figure out a way to have a dialogue with the state and then a separate dialogue here about how to administer some of the programs after understanding it. Because I don't think all the rules, even from the state yet, have been issued. And that's a difficult thing for local communities to have to grapple with when your tax bills are coming due and things like that. Residents get nervous and they go to you guys. So however we can do that on a parallel track, we will do. And then maybe some, as you do these, maybe one of the, well, not one here, we could always do a separate piece potentially for communities on that provision alone. Sometimes there's such a demand for a certain area that we could think about doing a separate piece too. Jerry would be happy to come and do that. He told me before we came to that.
I know I shouldn't have come to this.
Legislator, go ahead.
This mic right here. Do you really think I need a mic? But I have a question because you brought up like the sharing of the school districts and services. So my question is twofold. The first is, for example, one town I represent has 6 separate school districts within it. And then there's another school district that's shared between 3 separate towns. So the question is, how do you differentiate the savings, and then if you come up with this plan, how do you determine who gets what savings, if it's a school district, not a town, if it's a village and not a town or a school district?
It's really hard, just so you know. And Tom could attest, but we had a couple of actually sleepless nights trying to figure out that Rube Goldberg machine. What you end up doing for the purposes of the state submission, there's two kind of tracks. The state submission is actually kind of easy. You take the number of taxpayers globally in the county and you just divide it evenly, because ultimately the theory is they're all county taxpayers. But that is a rough estimation of what the savings actually are. When you get down to submitting savings to the state, right, because this is just step one of the plan, for the actual match, that's where some of the accounting will become more important for residents. So if you are a village resident within that school district, you may not have your county tax hat on, but you have your village tax hat on. You have to apportion some of that. That becomes an accounting piece. Some communities, though, but that will be a discussion for you all to consider as we go forward, too. Some counties decided to just do the county sort of common denominator and just divide it and try to evenly get it to people. But that's not how it works, right? That's not how savings happen and flow, right? If you share money on a dump truck, not everybody in the county gets access to the savings on this dump truck, so it becomes more problematic. So for the overarching savings for this plan, it's a rough estimation per resident. The chickens come home to roost when you actually are submitting the savings bills to the state for accounting, and that's when we'll have to do a finer tuning of the actual savings per resident. But it's very, very difficult.
And the regs from the state about how the match would work and how you have to distribute it have not been issued, because the first time you can get a match is in 2019 for your 2018 savings. So they haven't issued it. But in the guidance documents that they have issued, they have said, can everybody hear me?
Lean into it, Tom.
Is that better? No, it's it's better? Okay.
This is the first time anybody's ever said they couldn't hear Tom Citrino, by the way. So.
But the way the guidance documents work, it says that the way the savings or the match has to be distributed has to be with communities that actually partake in the shared service. So, if all those towns, if the town with all those school districts are participating and actually are participating in that shared service, then they would share the match based on probably the percentage of the savings that they generated. All right, but that hasn't been said or documented yet. So you have to participate in order to save, in order to get the match. If you don't participate, you're not going to get any of the matching money. The matching money goes to those who participate. That's the one thing the guidance documents are clear on. All right?
Now, there's a further complication. The level of participation and the formula for distribution of resources can be extremely complex, as Jim pointed out. So I expect there to be a tiered system where you can allocate the savings as a result of the participation easily and completely. You'll distribute the money one way, and where you can't allocate it, where you have very great difficulty allocating, you probably have a general distribution among participating jurisdictions, rather than try to cut the whole pie on one formula. I don't think that would work.
If I may, just real quickly, Vic Mallison with the County Executive's Office. Mayor Branson, your comments / questions about the new charitable contributions and how they're going to impact our impact your tax collection. I've been working with the governor's office to try to get some folks down here from tax and finance, because we're going to need a really detailed explanation of how this is going to work. And I just learned that in the first week of June, hopefully at the WMOA meeting, we'll be able to get somebody from tax and finance to come down and talk to us about those the specifics of those regulations. Okay.
Yeah, my question, I'm Mary Jane Shimsky, I'm a county legislator. My question is more in terms of scheduling and timing. I'll tell you, just the thought of coming up with the real plan in less than 4 months is making me break out in a cold sweat. But
now you know how we feel.
But some of the best ideas, some of the ones that we really do need to come to grips with as a collection of communities are big projects. For example, Supervisor Seligson brought up sewers. We would have to do ultimately 2 major consolidations to really get one big county sewer district. We're talking about something that even in the best of times, where we actually have things like fully staffed departments and not multiple whiteboards filled with to-do lists, would still take several years. And my question is, how do we move forward with something like that? How do we make sure we get credit for something like that? Because deadlines are important, but deadlines can also have a downside, which is forcing away the big items that really should be addressed.
I'll let Tom address. Thank you. That's actually, there's some planning grant things that Tom could talk about, so I'll let, and then I'll turn to some of the other pieces.
Things like that, that take a lot of time. The state has a pot of money called Municipal Restructuring Fund, an MRF fund, and for something like the sewer district that you're talking about, where you're going to need a lot of planning, you could include it in the plan. You may not realize the savings over the 3 years, but you can then get MRF money to help you plan to develop that. And it's interesting, that issue came up prior to the meeting today when we discussed that. So that's, I think, the first step in addressing that issue. If that's what you ultimately choose that you want to do, I would suggest then applying for MRF money to begin that planning process.
And we'll talk through the staging, right? We try to do it where we get as many of the projects that are implementable up front so you can get the tax savings just as a matter of course, right? So, for instance, in Albany County, they just announced their online portal to do shared equipment because that's an easy thing to do. That leads to immediate savings. Some of the longer things, like the healthcare consortium, which you guys have a very robust, actually, savings program in Westchester already in many cases. It doesn't result in the match for this plan, but when you're saving $10 million for a county over time, that's important for them anyway, right? But there's planning money for that where it may not be the tax savings money. The one other area that we grapple with too, which is not answered in this program, but could be answered in, at least put into the plan to try to get some planning grant money, are cross-county programs, right? In some levels, this doesn't stop at the Westchester County line. Some things on energy efficiency, like Saratoga and Albany, we're entering a couple of projects. They don't qualify under this law, but we'll try to help shepherd at least to say there's other sources of funds out there. So we try to prioritize the plan so you're maximizing your savings.
Just so nobody thinks that in this room that they aren't participating in this, we're going to have county departments are going to work with our consultants as well. There are opportunities for municipalities to work with county departments, and there are also opportunities for municipalities to work with one another. So I really appreciate all of our county commissioners and departments being here today, and I just want to make sure everyone's clear. You are very much a part of this process for us, and they will be.
If I could just say something. My name is Kathy O'Connor. I'm the Commissioner of the County Parks Department. And on a lighter note, we're not discussing taxes. I'd like to just offer, as far as shared services, our wildlife program has been very successful in Westchester County and in Connecticut and in New Jersey. And to be honest with you, we've really become the poster child with a very small staff. We've been able to really educate a lot of municipalities on how to handle the wildlife that we're dealing with. So I would throw that out to any municipality that would like to find out more. I would help set that up. We're also being nationally reaccredited for the fourth time this year. And to be perfectly honest, anyone that would like to share or hear our best practices on maintenance of park facilities, recreation programming, environmental things, conservation, et cetera, I'd be more than happy to share that. So thank you.
We'd like to host one of the public hearings at one of your beautiful parks if it's a nice day. Any other?
We want to have people have an opportunity to speak individually with any of the consultants. So if there's no more questions, we thank you all. Jim, do you just want to quickly mention how you're going to follow up with everybody?
So you can get a hold of us, and we know how to get a hold of you. We have all of your contact information. So you're going to start hearing from somebody on staff, either at the Rockefeller Institute or the Benjamin Center. So we're going to reach out actively to you. We just ask that you work with them to try to schedule something. So we'll be proactively. And if you can give us your contact information, we like to create sort of email lists and other things so we keep people fully involved as we are proceeding with the plan. So you're in the loop the entire time. So that would be the biggest piece as the next step.
Before you go, just, thank you, everybody. That's great. There was a municipal official, a council of governments that was scheduled on Friday. The chairman of the board was sending me a text message and asked, was that still on? And it's not, because we're having this meeting today and we didn't want to take you out of your municipalities and the work that you're doing, again, 2 days in 1 week. So that is getting rescheduled, I believe, for the beginning of June sometime. Right? So beginning of June, so thank you so much. And please fill out the surveys that Jim and the team have asked for, and we'll keep working together. Thanks again.